On an ordinary Sunday, Susan was walking down the street as usual, looking for plastic bottles or anything recyclable to make sure she would have something to eat at the end of the day when she saw a group of young people. They were a little further away and were talking quite eagerly. The man in a beautiful groom suit was gesticulating with his hands, and next to him was an equally attractive young woman in a stunning wedding dress. These are some lucky people, Susan thought, shaking her head lightly. The homeless woman continued her search while the obsessive thought kept spinning in her head. Sometimes the images appeared in Susan's mind, but they never turned into clear memories. They were more like reflections that were soon covered by the swaying of the water. The woman ended up on the street by an unfortunate accident, or rather, her life changed so abruptly that now it was not clear where she came from or who she was. The woman was like a ghost among people. Susan had to survive wandering the streets for several years. Oh, and it was her street friends who came up with her name, Susan. When she arrived at the shelter, she used to work in a popular restaurant, and all of a sudden she was kicked out without receiving any money or explanations. They even took her documents and threatened that if Susan went to the police, she would only get in more trouble. What happened before the shelter was kind of a haze. She remembered getting a snack from a person on the park and eating it. Then she woke up in the hospital. The elderly doctor bent over the patient and said, "You were poisoned. The dose was nearly lethal, but you were lucky. However, unfortunately, you still have some serious complications. Your gastrointestinal tract is damaged. Your eyesight and hearing are still suffering damage from the venom. Also, we can talk about partial amnesia. I'm not sure if your memory will ever recover completely, but if you continue to drink alcohol, the chance of that happening will be almost zero." Numerous medical procedures put Susan back on her feet, but her memory never returned. It seemed like she used to have a family. Unfortunately, she couldn't remember anything specific, like her husband's name or if she had children. So Susan had no choice but to get used to living under a fake name with no memory of her previous life. She became a woman with no past and thus no future either. Her whole life boiled down to very basic needs and was all about finding something edible and surviving. After finishing her daily routine of looking for recyclables in the trash can, the homeless woman looked at the young people once more and went to the recycling point before closing time to exchange what she collected for cash. She earned only a couple of dollars, all of which was enough for some bread and maybe some cheese. After going to the shelter, Susan immediately told the homeless leader, "Here, Stephen, this is all I have. Today I got some bread." "Very good. Go rest. Julio's soup is cooking, so it will be ready soon," Stephen said, looking at the contents of the bag that Susan brought and some notes in her hands. Then Susan went to Julio and silently handed him a donut. "This is for you. I saved up some money and thought you might like it." "Thank you, darling. You are so sweet. What would I do without you?" The man smiled and ran his hand through Susan's hair. Julio was cooking dinner over an open fire. Some of the smoke drifted into a makeshift chimney, but most of it filled the room, making it difficult to see. But that homeless group was used to it, because the hot smoke was still better than the cold air. Julio served the soup in cups for him and his friend, and sat down next to Susan. "Why are you so sad? Is it because you didn't get enough money today?" "No, it's just that I saw a couple of happy kids getting married today. It made me feel sorry for myself. In the end, I feel like I'm in a swamp, where I just keep sinking and can't escape." "Have some soup, Susan. You're probably hungry, and it makes you worry too much. Just live your life, and maybe you'll remember your past at some point," the man replied, and the woman just shrugged her shoulders. "I don't know. I would really like to remember at least something, and then the rest would fall into place." Susan frowned slightly. placing her hand on her cheek. The bride and the groom greeted their guests and then headed out onto the promenade. After the photo shoot in the park, the groom suggested going to see his parents. "It's going to take a minute. I need to remind them of something." "Tell me you're not still mad at them." Avoiding his gaze, Amy responded with restraint. "No, dear. Water under the bridge. It's just that the way they reacted to your decisions just shocked me, and I know your parents are against our marriage, but it's okay." Justin asked the driver to stop near the entrance of the house. "Okay, let's have a drink first. To be honest, I don't understand my family either. But you know, they are very opinionated. I just hope everything goes well today. I'm so tired of all the wedding planning. I thought I was going to go crazy, but it looks like I've managed to keep my sanity, and now we can finally begin this new chapter," he said. "I'm so proud of you, my love." Amy smiled, despite the fact that her relationship with the groom's parents was very strained. Justin's mother did not approve of her son's choice, and she did not hold back in expressing her opinion to her son. "Such marriages are never happy. You need to choose a woman of your social status." Justin's father shared his wife's opinion and even said that he would not go to their wedding. However, Justin managed to change his parents' opinion about this. Then, the bride and groom arrived at his parents' house. They were both drinking a cocktail, and while Amy was still sitting in the living room trying to remain calm, Justin was talking quietly with his mother in the kitchen. "It'll be fine, son. Your dad and I have prepared a gift for you that I'm sure you'll remember forever, and you don't have to thank us. It's from the bottom of our hearts, and will certainly help to create a nice atmosphere," Mrs. Gray said, looking towards her daughter-in-law. Justin didn't ask what it was. He didn't mind being surprised. The tension eased up a bit when the groom's mother asked her daughter-in-law for a private conversation in the kitchen. "As you can see, we're not poor, and Justin is our only child. So we want him to have a happy family and a solid marriage." That's how the mother-in-law started the conversation. The poor woman thought that now she would be scolded again, but this time, Mrs. Gray continued gently. "We have decided not to interfere with your family anymore. I will no longer hide the fact that we didn't like you at first, as we were worried that you only cared about Justin's money. But we have realized over time that you're a good person, so don't worry, we won't interfere with the marriage. In addition, we decided to invite an excellent musician to perform at the party. You will like her." The couple got back in the car and went to get ready for the party. Mrs. Gray called her husband and whispered something in his ear. Judging by the expression on her husband's face, he was really surprised. Apparently, he didn't agree with his wife's plan, but he didn't dare to contradict her. After dinner, Susan decided to take a nap. But suddenly, someone pushed her aside and said, "Hey friend, looks like you got a side job. They're looking for a musician, and you had told me that you could sing. Maybe you could earn some money." Jesus, who could be looking for a homeless musician? The woman thought, leaving the shelter. Then, a pair of smart, well-dressed people appeared in front of her. "Well, you need a singer. Are there no other artists you could hire? Why turn to a homeless woman?" Susan asked the well-dressed couple sharply. They were Justin's parents, and that was the gift they decided to give the couple. After all, they promised to pay for a musician, exactly what they were about to do. Realizing that she needed to solve the problem on her own, Mrs. Gray took several dollars from her purse. "I hope this money is enough to convince you that we are serious." At that point, the homeless woman thought it would be foolish to refuse, although she understood that something was clearly wrong in all that. Soon after, her taxi arrived, and Justin's parents asked another one for them. When Justin's parents got out of the car, they were anxious to see the reaction of their son and his fiancée. Looks like we're here," I think this is the address I was told to take you to. Susan's taxi stopped near where the wedding ceremony was to take place. I don't know what you did, but they paid really well for this trip. They even told me to come back for you in an hour. Well, good luck. I hope you at least eat well there, as it's not clear what else is going on here. Mrs. Gray was waiting for Susan at the entrance of the restaurant. Come on, the guests are already waiting. We told them you would play the guitar and perform live. When the woman took the stage, the guests were stunned to see that the musician was clearly a homeless person. But then, without even understanding how it happened, Susan ran her fingers over the strings like a great musician and began to sing. The room froze and there was absolute silence. Only Susan's voice performing magnificent music was heard. The woman did not understand how she knew the words. They simply came out of her subconscious, and along with the words, clear images surfaced. A flower garden, a dark-haired man with a little girl in his arms. He is smiling, waving his hand at her, saying something, but she couldn't understand the words. And after the last chord, there were a few seconds of complete silence. Suddenly, the hall erupted in thunderous applause. Susan's performance was an overwhelming sensation. No one there could imagine that a homeless person could have so much talent. So, Susan suddenly touched her head that started to hurt once more, trying to remember. Then, Amy ran out of the crowd of guests and jumped off the stage screaming, "Mom! Mommy!" She threw herself on the strange homeless woman's neck and she hugged her daughter. At that moment, something changed in Susan's head. Now she could clearly see the image of her family. She had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Amy looked closely into the homeless woman's eyes and said, "I always knew I'd see you again, Mom. It's too bad Dad didn't live long enough to see it happen. After I heard your voice singing the song you used to sing to me when I was a kid, I was sure it was you." Susan learned from her daughter that her husband, whose name was Anthony, died in an accident, but he never stopped believing that his wife Alice would return home one day. Sadly, it has been 7 years since she disappeared, and many of her relatives have completely lost faith that they would ever see her again. Leaving the guitar aside, no longer Susan, but Alice, took her daughter's face in her warm hands and said, "Thank you, my girl. Thank you for not giving up hope of seeing me again. I had problems and lost my memory for a long time. All these years, I was trying to remember who I was and where I came from." "Is this your gift? Who did you want to humiliate with this? Me, Amy, or Alice?" Justin shouted at his parents angrily. "As you can see, nothing has worked out for you. Your cruel plan turned out to be good. No, it turned out to be great. Now, all you have to do is apologize to all of us." By this time, the groom's parents had nothing to do but admit their mistake and ask the newlyweds for forgiveness. The wedding party continued. Despite the misunderstanding, the guests even asked Alice to sing a few more songs. Sometime later, Amy took her mother to her father's grave. The gray-haired woman looked at the inscription carved into that clear stone and couldn't hold back her tears. There was no going back in time, and nothing could bring her family back. But Alice was extremely grateful for what she had. In the end, she managed to find out who she was and found her daughter, which made her the happiest woman on earth. The woman gathered a bag full of food and went to visit her homeless friends. She told them what happened to her and left the shelter for good. The homeless talked about Susan's story for a long time, and everyone hoped that one day each of them would also be blessed with a miracle. If you know any similar stories, write about it in the comments, like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more fantastic stories.